Masechet Sukkah Daf Tet Zayin. We are talking about things that you can use for sechach that used to be a kli, but then you broke it. And once you break something, then it's no longer mekabel tum'ah. And so we saw that the Mishnah mentions pieces of a bed, like a half of a bed frame. You still cannot put on the sukkah because it's still usable. Technically, you can take even half of a bed frame and prop it up against a wall, and then you can still sit on it and lie down on it. Therefore, half of a bed frame is still considered unkosher sechach. According to this opinion, it would seem that if you had only one piece of it, not a whole bed frame, but just a beam, then you could use that for sechach. So that opinion is more lenient. And that contrasts with the more stringent opinion, which we saw at the end of the day yesterday, but now we're going to return to it with the gufa to analyze it more fully. Amar Rabbi Ameh bar Tavyomeh. He has a very nice name. Rabbi Ameh, his name is Good Day. So his name appears only in this sugya and nowhere else. So this was a good day for him that his halacha was recorded. So we're lucky we have this halacha from him. So he said, Sikecha bivla'ech elim pesula. If for sechach you use a worn out piece of material, a worn out vessel, then that is no good. That means it used to be a vessel and was mekabel tumah, but now it's just a little piece all worn out. So it's not mekabel tumah anymore. Nevertheless, even though it's not mekabel tumah, because it was once a vessel, it no longer can be used. So you see, he would be machmir. He's the more stringent opinion, and presumably even a piece of a bedpost would not be good. Now, my bila'ek kelim, we just want to explain, what does he mean by worn out vessels? Amar Abaye, matlaniyot she'en bahen shalosh al shalosh, de la chazyan lo la'aniyim velo la'ashirim. We're talking about some kind of cloth that is less than 3 by 3 finger breadths. So that's very small. And nobody would use that. Not poor people and not rich people. Rich people aren't going to use it because even something bigger, they're going to throw out. Even poor people, if it's less than 3 by 3, they have no use for it. You can use it as a rag, as a patch. It's too small. Even poor people throw it out. And so therefore, it's not considered a vessel at all, according to any definition. Nevertheless, since it came from a bigger piece and was once a vessel, you cannot use it for sechach. That is Rabbi Ameh bar Tavyomeh's opinion. We're going to support him with a braita. Tanya kevate de Rabbi Ameh bar Tavyomeh. Mahaselet shel shifa v'shel gemi. If you have a mat made out of papyrus or reed grass, this case actually makes a lot more sense than the cloth, because cloth, I mean, it can't be made out of wool. Maybe it's made out of linen, something that grows naturally. Still doesn't quite look like something that grows from the ground. So a mat that's made out of papyrus or reed grass, that would make more sense. Nevertheless, let's say it was some kind of mat that you would use to sit on or lie down on. That's a vessel, that's mekabel tumah, so cannot be used for sechach. However, if a remnant of it, just a little piece, in this case, a little piece would be 6 by 6 tefachim. It's the smallest piece of something that would be usable, something that is more expensive. The more expensive it is, the smaller you would still consider usable and not throw out. But papyrus is cheaper, and so even a 6 by 6 tefach might be usable. Less than that is considered a remnant, and therefore that is no longer mekabel tumah. Nevertheless, even though it's small, and you still cannot use it for sechach. So there you go. This baraita supports perfectly what Rabbi Ameh said with a slightly different example. Now, once we quoted the beginning of the baraita, we're going to quote the rest of it. And the rest of it is actually very important. Halacha l'maaseh. Ma'aseh letakanim gedola mesakechin ba ketana en mesakechin ba. Rabbi Eliezer omer afi mekabel tumah ve'en mesakechin ba. So regarding mats made out of reeds, depends on the size. If it's small, then you cannot use it for sechach. Because if it's small, that means you're going to use it for sitting on or for lying down on. And those are kelim. If a zav would sit on it, they would become tameh. So therefore, the small ones usually are made for using. Big ones, however, are not made for personal use that you would lie down or sit on it. The big ones are made for building material, to make a wall, to put on the roof. And so therefore, those are not kelim, they are not mekabel tuma, so you can use those for sechach. The Eliezer disagrees and says even the big ones are mekabel tuma. You're considering them a vessel, and you cannot use them. Okay, so the Tanakama is very important for our halacha l'maaseh, because if you go to Home Depot and buy a doormat, it might be made out of just natural material. Nevertheless, it's no good. Or a placemat, or something that's made as a cushion or a hammock. Anything that's made to lie down on, those are all vessels and would not be good. However, if you buy some kind of mat that's made for building material, fencing was a big discussion that several poskim talk about, but it's made for roofing, for shade. All those kinds of things would be fine, and so we could learn that halacha from this. Okay, good. Now we get to the next item in the Mishnah, which was Hachotet Bagadish, the famous case we mentioned a lot of times. Now we finally analyze it fully. So we're talking about a grain pile like this, and you have the grain piles there, and after that you dig a space inside. So usually you're supposed to start off with a space and then put walls and then cover it. But here you started with material and put the space in after, and that's a problem of ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asu. You have to make the sukkah by adding on the materials and not use pre-existing materials, and then where the sukkah is made on its own and not made actively. So Amar Rav Huna, lo shenu ela she'en sham halal tefach b'meshech shib'ah. Rav Huna comes to give a leniency and give a case where it would be okay to have to use a grain pile. So he says the Mishnah is only talking about a case where there is no space at all, not even one tefach by 7 by 7. But if you do have that starting off, then it's okay. Here's a picture that will explain it. So let's say first you have this step here that's under, and then you put all the hay on top of it. So what you see is that this step has space of 1 tefach by 7 across and 7 deep. So that by itself is an ohel. And for the purposes of tumat met, that would be an ohel. So since you already have space, you already have an ohel, so then if I just dig further and I go ahead and dig out a height of 9 more tefachim for a total of 10 and dig across, that's okay. That would be similar to a case where I have the sechach is too low and it's less than 10. I can dig down underneath the ground and dig it out and make it and get more height. So as long as you're starting off with some space, then you can dig the rest of it, because at least you have an ohel already. So that's a very interesting halacha. And to support Rav Huna, we have a braita. Tanya namehachi hachotet bagadish la'asot lo sukkah harezo sukkah. Braita says if you dig into a haystack to make a sukkah, it's kosher. That's all the braita says. That is kosher. Now, wait a minute. Our Mishnah says the opposite, that if you dig out a haystack, it's not kosher. There seems to be a really apparent contradiction between the Braita and the Mishnah. Oh, but if we explain that the Braita is talking about a case where there was already a pre-existing tefach, even though it's not good enough for a kosher sukkah, nevertheless, it is some space. So it's considered an ohel. It's just too short to be a sukkah. So then I'm just fixing it and making it the full height. And that is fine. The ta'aseh is done when I put all the hay on top. I'm making a tent, even though it's not yet a kosher sukkah. So then I can fill out the rest. And so if we assume Rav Huna, then we can use that to explain the contradiction between the Mishnah and the Baraita. Good. Everything we just said about Rav Huna is said in a different version, where the proof becomes a question. The question becomes a proof. Some say this as a contradiction, meaning they started off with the contradiction and used Rav Huna as the answer, rather than start off with Rav Huna and then say, oh, by the way, it can help answer a question. So we start with the problem. Tanan, our Mishnah, our Mishnah says digging in the haystack, no good. Vatanya hadezo sukkah. There's no braita that says it is good. Amar Rav Huna lakashya. Kan b'sheyesh sham halal tefach b'meshech shiv'ah. Kan b'she'en halal sham sham halal tefach b'meshech shiv'ah. So Rav Huna says, oh, I see this contradiction. No problem, I can solve it. When there is a space, that's the braita. So there is already some space, and one high by 7 by 7. 7 by 7, by the way, is the smallest width that you can have. So you need at least that much. And that would then it would be okay. And our Mishnah is talking about when you start off with zero space or less than a tefach. And that is no good. Okay, it's very interesting that you have these two versions. You see as transmitted and remembered in slightly different ways. And the second one, the braita, is cut short, just harezo sukkah. Now, you couldn't really have a braita that just says harezo sukkah without knowing the case, unless the braita was somehow always learned next to the Mishnah. So it's kind of dependent. In the first version, you have the full braita, chotet begadish sukkah harezo sukkah. So probably this is the original version of the braita. You wonder what were Rav Huna's original words? Did he say something as a comment on the Mishnah? Lo shanu, this Mishnah was only is talking about this case, but not that case. Or did he talk about his statement, kan b'sheyesh, kan b'she'en? So we don't know what Rav Huna's original formulation was, but substantively, it's the same thing. All right, and now we get to the next Mishnah, which is going to be very important for building Sukkot. A challenge is to try to build a Sukkah with the least amount of material possible. So we can learn a lot of halachot from this. Hamshalshel defanot milemala lemata. If someone builds the walls of their Sukkah that are attached at the top, and then they come down, but there's a gap on the bottom. So is that okay? If there's space between the top and bottom, between the bottom of the wall and the floor, that's 3 tefachim or more, then it's no good. So here, this is mishalshel, that the wall starts on the top, and it doesn't really matter how you build it, but the point is that it attaches to the top, and then there's space on the bottom. So the reason for this is that if there's enough space that a goat could go under it, then you can't consider that a wall, right? And you can use all the loopholes and extensions you want, but if a goat is passing right through, then that's just simply not a partition. It just breaks any legal fictions you want to try to make. So therefore, that's no good. If it's less than 3 tefachim, then that's okay, either because it's lavud, so it's considered like it's all filled in, or it's not enough that a goat could go under. In fact, the whole law of lavud might be dependent on the size of a goat. Okay, so that's the first halacha in the Mishnah. Second halacha, milemata ulemala, if the wall starts at the floor and then goes up, im gawa asarat tefachim keshera, as long as it's 10 tefachim high, the rest could be all airspace, and that would be fine. So you have 10 tefachim from the floor here. This could be very high, and it's okay. This is the principle of gud asik. Gud meaning partition. Asik means goes up. We consider, once it's 10 tefachim high, we consider the rest as if it's there. And this is a good partition. A goat couldn't go in, so this is totally fine. So in the previous case, we do not apply the principle of gud achit, that a wall goes down. That is another principle that might apply in other cases, that a wall that's 10 tefachim, we consider it going down forever. But it's just a contradiction if a goat can go under. So you can probably try to construct a case where you would say, right, does this mean that gud achit never works? Or is there a case where you can construct that you can use gud achit and still make sure that a goat doesn't go under? So maybe it would be something like, if you had a short wall here that was less than 10 tefachim, and then airspace, and then a big wall on top. So since you have some kind of short wall, a goat couldn't go there, but it's not yet kosher. But if you have a big wall that's 10 tefachim on top, then you can consider that to go down and cover the space. So perhaps a case like that. So would still use gud achit. But anyway, if a goat can go under, it's no good. That's Tanakama that says, yes, you can go up, but no, you cannot go down if it's any more than 3 tefachim. However, Rabbi Yosef disagrees. He says, Keshem she מלמטה למעלה 10 טפחים, כך מלמעלה למטה 10 טפחים. He says, just like from going, if you start at the floor and go up, as long as you have 10 tefachim, we consider that to extend all the way up to the sechach. So too, if you started the wall at the sechach and went down 10 tefachim, then you can consider it as if it goes all the way down. He doesn't, not worrying about the goats. He's not worrying about what it looks like. He says, all right, the same principle, good asik and good achit. Okay, that's Rabbi Yosef. Excellent. So that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to try to figure out, is going to compare the laws of Sukkah to the laws of Eruvin, as we've done many times. What's at the essence of their argument? Mor sabar mechisa tiluya materet, or mor sabar mechisa tiluya ena materet. So this is a concept in Hilchot Shabbat and Eruvin. If you have a mechisa, a partition that's suspended, meaning it's high up, and it goes down, but it doesn't reach the floor. It's suspended. So there's a machloket regarding Hilchot Eruvin, whether that's good or not good. And that would be the same here. Tanakama here that says you do not extend down would say a hanging partition in Eruvin is also not good. And the one, Rabbi Yosef, who says it is okay, would be the one who says in Eruvin also that it is okay. And here we're going to see a practical example of this from a Mishnah in Masechet Eruvin. Tanan Hatam. בור שבין שתי חסרות אין ממלאים ממנה בשבת אלא אם כן עשה לה מחיסה 10 טפחים. If you have a cistern that's between two courtyards, shared by two courtyards, you cannot use it on Shabbat. Neither person can use it unless you make a mechisa 10 tefachim somewhere. Ben milamala, ben bilamata, ben betoch ogeno. So let's see the picture here. I'll make it clear. And this is a good test. If you remember Eruvin, then you'll remember this picture that we saw over there also. So you have two neighbors, right? And they share this courtyard. There is a wall down the middle. And assuming there's no Eruv, so they can't carry from one to the other. So this neighbor cannot go and get water from here because the water is all connected. And by drawing water, even though it's on his side, he's drawing water also from the other side because the water moves around. And therefore, he's in effect carrying water from the neighbor to his side. And that's no good. That's no good, even if you have this brick wall. Therefore, you have to add something. You have to add another mechitza underneath, under the lip, the ground level. You have to put it. Now, it could be anywhere. It could be in the airspace between the ground level and the water. It could be down deep in the water on the bottom. It could be somewhere in between. It could be anywhere. So we do make some kind of legal fiction. You don't have to put a solid metal wall that is seal tight, waterproof. You don't have to do that, but you do have to do some kind of symbolic wall to show that this is a different domain. Okay, so you see, according to Tanakama, even though you have a wall above, we do not say gud achit. This is a suspended wall, and it does not go down. So that would fit with Tanakama. But in the Mishnah, we have another opinion. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Bet Shammai omerim melema'ala, or Bet Hillel omerim melemata. Okay, he also agrees that you need a wall. He just thinks it's a machloket. You can't put it anywhere you want. According to Bet Shammai, it has to be on top, in airspace, and according to Bet Hillel, has to be on the bottom, has to be in the water. But that he agrees that the wall on top, the brick wall, does not extend. So that's not, that would still be like Tanakama. But we have another opinion in that Mishnah, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Lo tehe mechisa gedola min hakotel shebenehen. He says this partition that you're making shouldn't be any more stringent than the wall that's there between the two courtyards. In other words, he's saying that the wall that's there is the best wall that you have. Right, you have a full wall between here, and so that's fine. You don't need to add anything else, right? Some little flimsy thing that you're going to add at the bottom of the water is not going to do any more good than what you have already. So you don't need it. So you see, according to this last opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, you do say gudachit, a suspended wall, is perfectly fine, and therefore Rabbi Yosef, in regarding Sukkah in our Mishnah, seems to match up with Rabbi Yehuda in the laws of Eruvin. Okay. And the Tanakama will match up with each other, that you do not make them go down. Okay, so that seems to be a reasonable conclusion. And in fact, the Yerushalmi concludes this way, that these would match up. But the Bavli does not. We're going to reject this. Amar Abba bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda b'shitat Rabbi Yosef Amara, Amar mechisa teluya materet. Wait, so this is still with the shita that we are working. We are going to mash them up. Rabbi Yochanan, who's from Eretz Yisrael, says Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yehuda follows the same opinion, same view as Rabbi Yosef, that says a hanging wall is fine. We consider it as if it goes down, but just like in the Sukkah, it will go down. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, yes, they match up the laws of Sukkah and Shabbat. But now the Bavli says, Velohi, lo Rabbi Yehuda savala ke Rabbi Yosef, velo Rabbi Yosef savala ke Rabbi Yehuda. They do not actually match up. They do not necessarily agree with each other, because you could agree with one but not the other, and the other but not one. How so? Lo Rabbi Yehuda savala ke Rabbi Yosef. Adkan lo kama Rabbi Yehuda hatam ela berubei chatzerot derabanan. Rabbi Yehuda, he said a hanging wall regarding eruv, that's okay. We can consider it as if it extends down into the water, because all the laws of eruvin are derabanan. We're talking about courtyards that are reshut hayachid deoraita. And the rabbis came and said, hold on, if we allow you to carry in your courtyard, it's open air, then you're going to get mixed up and you're going to come to carry in the Reshut Harabim deoraita. Therefore, the rabbis come and say, you have to make an aruv. But the whole thing is really midrabanan. On the deoraita level, you're allowed to carry anyway. So that's why the Rabbi Yehuda is lenient in that case. Aval hacha sukkah deoraita lo. But the law of Sukkah, midoraita, you have to build a proper Sukkah as defined by all these sources that we are seeing. And therefore, he would say, no, for a Sukkah, deoraita, I would not agree that you can have a suspended wall. I would not say good achit. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda does not necessarily agree with Rabbi Yosef. And how about Rabbi Yosef? He can also find a reason why he would say his opinion only in Sukkah. ולא רבי יוסף סבלה כרבי יהודה, עד כאן לא כאמר רבי יוסף הכה אלא בסוכה דמצוות עשה, אבל שבת איסור סקילה, לא. Maybe Rabbi Yosef says, I'm fine with having a sukkah that has an upper wall and it extends down, because the whole mitzvah of sukkah is mitzvat aseh, which is not so stringent. Unlike Shabbat, if you violate Shabbat, it's isur sikila. That's much more stringent. So therefore, he would not agree regarding Hilchot Shabbat that you can extend it down. Okay, so each one has some reason not to agree with each other. So maybe really they don't agree with each other. Okay, now that we've established that Rabbi Yosef, in fact, only said his halacha regarding Sukkah, but not Shabbat, we're going to have a question from the following story. What about that story in Sefer? I'm going to tell you the story in a second, but it was a story where they relied on a hanging wall, and Sipori was the place of Rabbi Yosef. So if they didn't follow Rabbi Yosef, who were they following? Lo al pi Rabbi Yosef, ela al pi Rabbi Ishmael bi Rabbi Yosef. You know what actually happened in a later generation, not Rabbi Yosef's time, but his son, Rabbi Ishmael bi Rabbi Yosef, and his son, Rabbi Ishmael, disagreed with his father. Rabbi Ishmael said that a hanging wall is okay. And so that since it happened in that generation, that's why they did it. Now, my ma'aseh, what was the story? Dechi atar Rav Dimi amar pam achat shachechu velo habiu sefer Torah me'erev Shabbat lemachar pirsu sedinim al gabe hamudim ve'habiu sefer Torah ve'kareu bo. One time they forgot to bring a sefer Torah to the Bet Knesset from before Shabbat. So on Shabbat they open their echal and says, "Oh no, there's no Torah. Where is it? It's in the guy's house who lives next door." So what did they do? They took sheets and they spread them on posts, and they carried the Torah from one to the other. Here's a picture, right? So here's the Bet Knesset over here, and here's the person's house who had the Sefer Torah in it. It's interesting that the Sefer Torah was in the person's house and not in the Bet Knesset. Nowadays, usually we keep all the Sefer Torah in the Bet Knesset. Only very few people keep a Sefer Torah in their house. But perhaps in those days it was different. People owned their own Sefer Torah. It's a mitzvah to write your own Sefer Torah. So people would have their Sefer Torah in their house. And then when it was time to read, they would bring it. People would take turns and bring their Sefer Torah. Okay, in any case, it was in his house. And so they had a problem. How are they going to carry it? Because he's in an adjacent courtyard. So the answer is, oh, look, there was some, they put some sheets over here, and that created a partition. The sheets did not go down to the ground. This picture looks like they go pretty far down, but let's assume that they were 10 tefachim from the top to the middle, but then they didn't reach the ground. And nevertheless, they permitted it and said, we'll consider this all one courtyard, and yes, you can go ahead and carry. We're assuming there are no other neighbors in that enclosure. So you wouldn't need an eruv because a bet knesset is not a living space. So you don't need you don't need to make an eruv. It's all one courtyard. And so since they relied on this being 10 tefachim off the ground, that you can more than 3 tefachim off the ground, and nevertheless you can go down. So who do they follow? Can it be Rabbi Yosef? No, they followed the son of Rabbi Yosef. This is interesting because according to Rabbi Yochanan, who we just saw, and what we find in Talmud Yerushalmi, really Rabbi Yosef did agree with Rabbi Yehuda and did think that you can have a suspended wall. So according to that, this could have been in the time of Rabbi Yosef, and there's no need to say that Rabbi Ishmael, his son, disagreed with him. But the Bavli did not understand it that way, and they found a reason to distinguish between Sukkah and Shabbat, and according to that, you have to say it was in the time of the son, Rabbi Ishmael. Okay, one last question on the story. What do you mean that there were posts there and they came and brought sheets and put them on Shabbat? How could you do that? Just by carrying the sheets out there, now you're already carrying. So you're already violating carrying just so that you can make a partition. You can't make a partition on Shabbat. So ela maseu sedinim perusina gabe amudim ve'viu sefer Torah v'karu bo. Rather, you have to say that the sheets were already there. They left them out to dry from before Shabbat. And then they said, oh, no, we forgot the Torah. What are we going to do? We can't carry. They went outside. They said, oh, look, someone left these sheets out above these posts. This is another way of thinking about it, that there was like a hallway that happened to have these sheets hanging down. They were hanging down somewhat, but not all the way to the ground. And so they found that. They said, oh, lucky us. We can carry through this corridor. And they brought the Torah and they read it. All right, good. So that was a fantastic story, and that showed the application of this halacha. Obviously, we're gonna follow Tanakama that says we do not say gudachit, we do not use a suspended wall. So we have to make sure that when we make the walls of a sukkah, that there is not too much space on the bottom. If there is space, it has to be less than 3 tefachim. Good. Now, so a few interesting cases. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Abimeh. Mahaselet arba'a umashehu materet basukkah mishum dofen. He says, I can make a sukkah with just 4 tefachim plus a little, 4.1 tefachim of matting, and that's all I need to make a wall. So I'm sure everybody's surprised. All the students are like, what do you mean? It has to be 10 tefachim high, right? How could you make something out of only 4? So he probably challenged the students to figure it out. Hechi abid, talele ba'imsa, pachot mishelosha lemata, upachot mishelosha lema'ala, v'chol pachot mishelosha kelavud dameh. Here's how you do it. You take that 4.1 and you put it right in the middle. And within 3 of the floor, so then that's lavud to the floor, and within 3 to the top. So that's lavud to the top, and therefore we can apply lavud plus the 4 and a little. That would mean a little less than 3, a little less than 3 here, and it's as if there's a full 10, and that's a totally kosher sukkah. Fantastic. Now we said peshita. Okay, Rav Chisda, you thought you were challenging us, but isn't that obvious? We're just applying the principles that everybody knows. What are you teaching us new? I might have thought that I can apply lavud once in one direction, but I can't apply it in 2 directions simultaneously, right? I might have thought that somehow if there's space on the bottom, I kind of extend this down. But if I extend it down, then it can't go both ways. You can't burn the wick on 2 ends. And so he says, yes, you can. There's no problem, right? It extends down and extends up simultaneously. So that's a good chidush. Okay, now we have a challenge to Rav Chisda from a braita metibe. This braita says that you can use a mat that's 7 and a little, 7.1 tefachim, and you can make a wall out of that. That sounds like, what do you mean 7.1? That sounds like you're putting it on the floor until 7 and a little, and then it's less than 3 tefachim from the top. So you're using lavud once. That shows that you can only use lavud once. Otherwise, the Baraita should have said a bigger chidush, that you can have even 4.1. So this Baraita seems to contradict what Rav Chisda just said. So how is he going to answer it? Oh, we can say that this Baraita is not talking about a sukkah that's only 10 tefachim high, but rather maybe it's talking about a sukkah that's much higher. And it's teaching us that you can even put that 7 high up and extend it down, like Rabbi Yosef, who says good achit. So here's a picture. Here's Rav Chisda's case that says you can put this in the middle and use good sik and good achit. No, you don't need. He just says lavud. He doesn't even, because it's less than 3. So you can extend it up and down. And here is the case where it's higher, right? This is a high sukkah, more than 10 tefachim. And the chidush of the baraita is you can take the 7 and put it here, less than 3 from the top. So you have a lavud, and it has to connect one way or another. And so you have lavud, and then you can extend down with good achit. And so that's talking about a different case, and that therefore it does not contradict what Rav Chisda said. Okay, good. Amar Rabbi Ameh. Pas arba'a u'mashehu matir basukkah mishum dofen. Then Rabbi Ameh is going to give us another chidush about the walls going horizontally. Even if you have a board that is 4.1, you can put it there, and that can fill in a whole wall. Umokim le bepachot mishlosha tefachim samuch dofen, bepachot mishlosha samuch ladofen kelabud dameh. And you put it 3 or less next to the side wall. So you have 4. Really, you need 7 at least to make a wall, but that's okay. You can include lavud and have only 4.1, and this is less than 3, and that's considered filled in, and you'll be okay. Okay, so nice. So now we're really skimping on material here, both this way and that way. And now, my kamash malan, what is Rabbi Ameh's chidush? Isn't this obvious that you can use lavud sideways? Hakamash malan, shiur meshech sukkah ketana shib'a. Actually, he was teaching us a different halacha altogether, that the smallest sukkah is 7 by 7. Remember, we had a big machloket. Rabbi said it was 4 amot by 4 amot. By teaching this halacha that you can have 4 plus lavud, then I know 4 plus 3, that's 7. So I incidentally learned the size of a sukkah, but the fact that you can use lavud for a wall, that is actually obvious. And that is the end of the daf and the end of discussion of the Mishnah. And so for homework, you can try to design your own sukkah using the least amount of material possible, right? What would be the amount of material, and what would your design look like? Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.